Are we stuck in 2016? I was listening to the most recent episode of the 538 podcast, and the guest argued that American politics are calcified and are fighting over the same issues over and over. She argued that we've shifted away from fighting over issues stemming from the New Deal, e.g., questions about the size of government spending, etc., to fighting on issues primarily relating to identity. I'm not totally clear on what she thinks Trump's role in this is, but I think she seems to be saying that this process was happening anyways, slowly in the background. But Trump managed to accelerate it greatly, I guess? It was an interesting argument. And the idea that we've shifted not our positions, but the very things we're fighting over is interesting. I was wondering if anyone here had any thoughts on this? Do you guys buy this theory or no? I think we may actually be stuck in the year 2000. Somewhere between then and now, bipartisanship died and politics became a zero-sum game where the point was not to govern the country and solve problems, but to amass and retain power. Until we demand that our elected leaders work across the aisle to solve the many challenges we face, we will be stuck in this eternal Groundhog Day of identity politics and no actual policy debate. We need leaders who will put the interests of the country ahead of the interests of their parties. It goes back further. The same Trumpy anti-woke people were screaming in 2003 that if you didn't support Bush and his illegal war, we were lied into, then we were traitors and needed to leave the country if we hated it so much. The argument I've heard that I kind of agree with is that various forces have made it almost impossible for governments to make any meaningful change to people's material well-being. As a result, identity politics has become a dominant focus because people can be emotionally invested in the outcome, but it would have very little material effect on them if they win or lose. So there is very little cost to losing because you just move on to the next thing. I think that Trump set off a cherry bomb in economic conservatism. Pre-Trump, the entire concept of conservatism was small gov, free markets and cut spending concept, not reality. The $8 trillion Trump added to the deficit blew that up, and the DeSantis-Abbott wing of the party brings big gov authoritarianism into the mix. There's nothing left to the party but culture wars and conspiracies. Reporting is stuck in 2016. Big media brands like 538 love wringing their hands over Donald Trump's position in American politics because he's both uncomplicated, familiar territory for coverage, and he drives their click-based advertising revenue models. The GOP has no policies. None. Donald Trump didn't even have a fucking platform in 2020. All they have is culture wars. How can we debate policy when one side simply doesn't have any outside of we are against whatever the Democrats are doing? Yes, absolutely. Because politicians realize this works. It's just an extension of values voters and evangelicals. The identity politics that changed everything in the 90s and 2000s. So the left focused on their own racial and LGBT politics to compensate. This is why bringing religion into politics is too dangerous. Because religion isn't the only religion. The fight comes exclusively from one side. One side fights against the existence of people they hate. Queer folks. Anyone who has melanin. Anyone who isn't from the US. Anyone who wants to control their own reproductive autonomy. The people targeted by this cannot move on from this. We are fighting for our right to exist. When someone throws a fist at you, you no longer have a choice of whether or not you want to be in a fight. You are in a fight. We've been fighting over the same issues since before my great-great-great-grandparents were born. 150 years ago we went to war with each other over the right to own another human being. People seem very desperate to go back to a time that never existed. I am genuinely curious what happens to the MAGA crowd when Trump dies. I lean in the direction that he'll lose again in 24 for a lot of the same reasons he did in 20, and I don't think and hope that he lives to see the 28 election. I doubt the culture war issues ever go away, but I wonder if they die down because they don't have that unifying figure anymore. The primary thing we're fighting over is the erosion of the social order where straight white men are in charge of everything always. The only things Trump offered that others did not was his open racism and misogyny. A vote for centrists on either side is a vote for the resumption of functional government. Vote in primaries. Vote for Congress. Vote for president. Vote out the extremists, even if you agree with them, so that the government can function. We are not stuck in 2016. We as the American people are stuck in their game. The politicians' game. Where they wear nice clothes, tell you what you want to hear, then do the exact opposite when you vote them in. That keeps happening, over and over. The last time we as a nation had a spine is when JFK and MLK was still alive and we were marching to DC at over 1 million strong. What happened around that time? Oh, that's right. They killed both of them. Then democracy died. I rest my case. Mexico is poised to elect its first woman president, and the U.S. is poised to recycle the same old white men. It doesn't matter if we're stuck in 2016 or not. We're just stuck. There's no contesting the fact that the one wants us fighting each other. They've taken over $11 trillion out of the economy in about 10 years. CEOs have had over a 1,000% increase in pay. The rest of us have gotten about 15. There is no argument to be had. Over 70% of all funding for all the quack job nut job racist groups comes from a handful of old white rich men. Yes, we actually think that. For good reason. First mistake. 538. Polls are stupid and rarely represent actual outcomes in tight races. So why bother polling? This theory was went over in my Politics President class. Source sides. John, Chris Tosanovich, and Lynn Vavreck. 2022. The Bitter End: The 2020 Presidential Campaign and the Challenge to American Democracy. Princeton University Press. And a lot of this theory is deeply investigated within this book when analyzing the 2020 presidential campaign and election. I recommend you check it out. It will be like this until America has a true rival on the world stage again. The same thing happened to Rome after Carthage fell. Buckle up. Well, of course, there isn't really any politics anymore. Once Clinton and then Obama made it clear that the Democrats would be siding with capital over workers in every instance, there became no live questions to answer. Politics is only about affect and attitude to the horrific indignities of American life. Identity politics was started with the first racist laws in Virginia in the 1600s. It was done to prevent a second Bacon's Rebellion and to keep the poor from working together. 450 years later, the wealthy are still using the same tricks. The Southern strategy predates 2016 by decades. Identity politics has been the bread and butter of the GOP for ages. There is no preeminent leftist party in the United States. There are two capitalist parties. Given the narrowness of that Overton window, yes, the only issues that effectively remain are maybe a handful of social programs to ameliorate the poverty baked into capitalism and otherwise identity issues. If we cannot break free of that mold, we're arguably destined to stay there, as elites would undoubtedly like. Unfortunately for elites, external factors will force our hand: unsustainable finances or climate change. Whichever comes first.